Does working on the illusion of the person not just perpetuate the beliefs in a separate person? Is it not just part of the searching, seeking mind, not as something to be rid of, but to be recognized as what is experienced and not ultimately you? This leads one to giving up the search, or it comes to rest in beingness. Ultimately, there is a giving up on the person. But a lot of people that come to my talks are at different places, even though there isn't someone that's a different place. And somebody that's having an immense emotional crisis or life crisis, them trying to avoid it by saying they're not somebody is not wise. And by moving away from that and not dealing with it is not wise. Sometimes the story needs to be tidied, the cage needs to be tidied up before there can be an addressing of non-duality. That's how I feel from working with people. But it might just be like I've had such close, intimate relationships with people that have come to my talks over the years. So I've been teaching now for like 8 years, I think. And I'm not like a really big popular teacher. I'm quite small, so often if you come to my retreats or my talks, I get to know you. And from doing my one-to-one sessions as well, my experience is that there's a lot of people out there that are using non-duality to try to escape a crisis in their life. And big emotions and difficult emotions, and I think that needs to be dealt with first. I think that psychology and that disbalance, I mean, some people I work with and have met over the years, you know, they've got themselves in such a mess, they've tried so hard at life, and then they've got themselves into life situations from their conditioning, which is a very complicated life, and they can't get out of it. And that life, in a way, is perpetuating their sense of self. And sometimes that needs to be looked at, you know, look, what are their thought processes to this, and what is their relationship to this, and what are they doing to perpetuate it? Because otherwise it's like you're talking about non-duality and they can't hear it at all because they're so focused on themselves and their problems. And sometimes when you're awakening as well, big emotions can come up that like past karmas, and these big emotions can be so big and overwhelming that there's no point about talking about non-duality at that point, because it's so strong. It's like a big massive tsunami coming over. And at that point, I think somebody needs to have learned skills in order to deal with the illusion, in order to deal with themselves, and not given them any tools to deal with themselves. Then they can just use that sentence to send them into deep despair. And that's not what non-duality is about at all. So I think it's a bit of both. You need to learn how to have a healthy relationship with the self, with the personal self, and not be using non-duality to escape that, as well as listening to non-duality. I don't think that working on the self perpetuates the self. In fact, I think that as your big emotions begin to become more stabilized, there is less seeking naturally. So then it's easier to kind of like not ignore the self, but to hear something else. But it doesn't really matter, like our views and our perspective on it is only our views and our perspective. It's all happening. You might think that I'm speaking and that it's me teaching you this, but I'm just God's puppet, just like you're God's puppet. So even like this perspective on what's the right way to teach it or not the right way, or is it perpetuating it? Everything's God's will. So I'm just doing what I'm doing and you're just doing what you're doing. And the idea that you have a choice between a better non-duality teacher or a worse non-duality teacher is complete ignorance. This is impossible. This is impossible. That means that there is separation, there is free will, and that there is a process that you're going on. But we like to have this, like this is the way and that is the way. And like even what I'm saying, you could go and argue to another speaker that says, no, you've just got to completely ignore the self.